guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm an astrologer, and in my videos here on YouTube I analyze the birth charts of people, and in today's video we are going to have a look at Johnny Depp's birth chart and his current transits and what's gonna happen for him in the upcoming months. I wanted to use the current public situation with his lawsuit with Amber Heard so that we can understand what are some indicators in someone's birth chart of relationship struggles that can turn in legal issues at some point. And I wanted to have an objective look at both charts, so I'm trying not to make a biased video over here. If I do turn a little bit biased, I apologize, because I do have my own opinions in this one, but I'm gonna try to just focus on the astrology aspect of it. And Amber Heard's birth time is not publicized, so I will not be able to use her chart. So we are going to use Johnny Depp's chart just because this one's enough for us, and it has a lot to say as well. So just for information, Johnny Depp was born June 9th, 1963 at 8:44 a.m. in Owensboro, United States, Kentucky. He's got a Leo rising at 12 degrees and his sun at 18 degrees, his moon at 13 degrees. That is if you are using a certain chart generator and you're not sure about the coordinates, these are the details to help you adjust the time. Great, and his birth chart is definitely very interesting. He's, as you can see from the get-go, he's got a lot of placements spread around the whole chart, and you can definitely see that first of all he's gonna be well known. Now of course you may have similar energies and you may not be a celebrity, but there's a level of recognition that you acquire when you have placements similar to Johnny Depp's. So for instance, the sun in the 11th house provides him with popularity, and I've seen in general people with personal planets in the 11th house, maybe Mars is a little bit problematic, but in general when you have personal planets or Jupiter in the 11th house, you are very well liked by society no matter what you do. And we could have seen as well that when the very first lawsuits were running around between following their divorce around the assault and the sexual abuse and violence allegations that went around, Johnny Depp quickly had people on his side. Like there was a lot of people that supported him, and that was an interesting observation for me when I first saw what was happening, because in general, especially when there's man involved, the natural public's instinct is to cancel the person being accused. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, that's just a fact. It's that's just a natural tendency that happens, and it wasn't the case for that to happen with Johnny. I mean, of course he's got canceled by Hollywood and he got fired from parts of the Caribbean. Definitely there were a lot of repercussions that came from the public matter that he was having with Amber Heard, but he still had the public on his side, and that is definitely shown by the sun being in the 11th house. He also has Venus and Mercury together in the 10th house. Venus represents in his chart the ruler of the career. So when you have the ruler of the career in the 10th house, you are very well known, or at least you work with celebrities, you know, with influential people. And Mercury in the 10th house as well does show communication abilities. The mind is very artistic in its conjunction with Venus, and Mercury also rules the 11th house, and the 11th house explains how you can monetize from your career. So the fact that they're both together in the 10th house shows that he would just be very successful at public matters. Now when it comes to the relationship aspect, there is Saturn in the 7th house that I'm easily concerned with. Saturn is, first of all, in the house of relationships, partnerships, law as well. In general, the house where Saturn is, you experience some lessons coming up in that area. It is also where you are particularly more careful, where you are more restrictive and serious with yourself, but it is also where you get a lot of lessons and growth by overcoming the obstacles in that area of life. A lot of people feel very comfortable with the house where Saturn is in, especially people with Saturn in the 10th house. They just, feel very hardworking and determined to get results in their career. In other houses, Saturn may not feel as comfortable. For instance, Saturn in the 12th house tends to be less comfortable because of the more hesitant energy. The 12th house is more hidden, right? And Saturn is all about the lessons and tackling the things that we don't want to face. When Saturn is in the 7th house deals with law and relationships and partnership matters. So instantly we could see that either he was about to marry late, or he would go through a divorce at some point, or he would just be very careful with the people that he was about to date. Now, Saturn over here, apart from the fact that it's retrograde, which may amplify the difficulty of it, is also squaring his Venus and Mercury in the 10th house, right? So everything that provides him with success in his career, right? Venus and Mercury, we talked about this. It's what drives his career because it's his career and money ruler. They're squared by Venus. And if you know anything about aspects in astrology, well, red ones in general are conflicting placements. That means that there's going to be tension between the two placements interacting together that at some point will get activated, and you will have to learn to balance them out. So yeah, we can see that definitely the lessons that he will get from his relationships will be seen at some point in a public manner. Now, you cannot actually tell how big this is gonna be, but what drove me to believe that this is about divorce, this is about the division of assets, and maybe goes a little bit beyond into the intricacies of abuse and assault and so on and so forth, is the position of Chiron in the 8th house. Chiron is the asteroid of healing work. So Chiron reflects where you have to face your wounds and where you're going to be really, really triggered. Like someone's going to put a finger into your wound and it's going to do it like that. Chiron in the 8th house can show fears when it comes to shared finances and shared resources. So a fear that maybe someone will steal what is rightfully yours, maybe a partner, right? Just like in the case of Amber Heard, after the split, there was a lot of losses of his own values and his own sense of security. And the 8th house can also deal with intimacy, but obviously not our place to comment on that. So definitely there is a potential here with the 8th house shared resources from marriage to be some sort of conflict at some point. Again, Chiron also connects with his sun in the 11th house, which is responsible for his popularity. So, and the sun also is his chart ruler. So we can see that whatever wounds, whenever gets triggered, it's going to be very triggering for him as a person. Now you're gonna ask, well, what are the transits? How do we know that this is going on right now? In general, the birth chart is a map of your life. It does not guarantee that some things are gonna come into play. In general, it does, but you have to find the right timing for these events. In general, you see massive conjunctions, massive progressions happening around the placements involved, the natural potential from the birth chart. So we have talked about the Venus-Mercury conjunction square the Saturn as being probably the catalyst for a legal trouble that will affect his social status. So if we have a look at the transits that are currently ongoing, so today there was the hearing for the defamation lawsuit against Amber Heard, and we can see that North Node has just recently passed his Venus and Mercury, and also at the same time he's going through a Saturn return, and actually this month, right in April, I'm filming this on April 13th, Saturn is right on top of his natal Saturn. So very powerful conjunction. Straight out of the bat, the square that happens in his natal chart now happens with on the transits as well. So Saturn is currently squaring the lunar nodes on the sky, and it happens right on top of the natal pressure. Now, this is not it. This is not everything. We also have transit Chiron on top of his Jupiter. And Chiron has been in Aries for a couple of years now, and if you have any Aries placements, you know what I'm talking about. We get very triggered during this time, and it's particularly triggering when Chiron reaches a 1-degree orb to your natal placements. So this month, Transit Chiron conjuncts the natal Jupiter in Johnny Depp's chart, and the natal Jupiter is the ruler of the 5th house of creativity, passion, and romance. So it's safe to assume that the current tension caused by the Saturn lunar node square on top of his Mercury, Venus, and Saturn is no fun for him, and he's definitely not having a good time. You don't need astrology to tell that, unfortunately, but that's going to be shown here as well. Venus, interestingly enough, whenever major dates happen, we do see the personal planets, the inner planets, also involved in conjunctions and major aspects to the natal chart. So Venus in general is an indicator of benevolent energy, so it's a good influence in the chart, and it's also on top of his part of fortune, which leads me to believe that the current events are karmic and they were set to happen before everything else. And this is also an indicator that he's going to get a lot of popularity as a result of this lawsuit. Now, to understand what is going to happen next, I'm going to show you in a second, but I just wanted to pull in the transits and progression at the same time so that we can see what progressions and aspects are forming the progressions between the natal chart and so on and so forth. So in black, you can see Johnny Depp's natal chart. In orange, we see the transits, and in green, we see the progressions. Now, the aspects that you see over here, I've selected them at under 1 degree orb, so they're pretty important and pretty exact. We want to get as exact as possible in this situation, and we're only working with major aspects as well. A lot of things going on. So as you can see, a lot of lines. In general, when you have a 1 degree orb, you don't see a lot of things. And the very first thing that I'm noticing is that his progressed sun trines his natal Jupiter. Now, the progressed sun moves 1 degree every year. So this is a year-wide tendency and a year-wide aspect that we can see in his chart. But the fact that Chiron is right on top of it, right on top of Jupiter, it feels like his wound related to romance and the pleasure is triggered, but because the progressed sun trines it, it feels like there's a sense of, I'm going to be confident, I'm going to defend myself. Also, the progressed sun is at 14 degrees, his ascendant at 12 degrees. Only 2 years ago, his progressed sun entered his natal 1st house again, meaning that his progressed sun had been on top of his 12th house for the previous many years. I think about 20 something years or 30 years even. I have to calculate it. But long story short, he's had a major natal house change with the progressed sun 2 years ago, which I believe is the year when he finally sued her for defamation. So we can see that he's kind of getting confidence to get his reputation back. Okay, there's also another interesting thing happening. His natal moon is squaring Jupiter in his natal chart, and Chiron, of course, is kind of amplifying and pressurizing this energy. This shows that his emotional needs are pretty much not being met, or he's feeling like his emotional needs are not met. His moon in Capricorn also is the ruler of the 12th house of the mental health. It's not a comfortable time at all, but because his north node is in the 12th house and in Cancer, it can be a very telling time for the energies that he needs to learn in order to progress towards his soul purpose, which is to be more spiritual, to open up to the energy of Cancer, which is all about intuition, maternal energy. It is likely that I don't know how he was before he met Amber Heard at all. I have not followed his personal life, and definitely, not my place to do that. But I would assume that he's coming at least from a past life energy and environment where he was very much masculine, like lived in a divine masculine energy, which was pretty much concerned with bringing structure, just making things happen from hardworking point of view, because that's definitely a divine masculine energy, like just doing things, just making things happen. But the Cancer energy and the 12th house energy is more about using your intuition, using your compassion to make decisions. And with the moon in Capricorn, the ruler of his 12th house in Cancer, you can definitely see that in his natal chart, there was this potential to be torn between his feminine and masculine energies, because in his personality, he's very rational in the way that he's dealing with his feelings, but the direction that he's pulled towards is much more the opposite. So if we have a look at the transits and progressions, this is also being pressed a little bit. So it's very likely that by the end of this lawsuit and by the end of this whole situation, he's actually going to be much kinder to himself and also the people around him. Not saying that he wasn't before, just that this is definitely a very eye-opening experience to the person that he wants to become moving forward. Alrighty, a couple more things to mention. Transit Lilith is conjunct his midheaven as well. He's progressed midheaven to be exact. So Lilith as a placement shows where there is dark energy involved, where there's a shadow self that needs to be addressed, but it also represents dark feminine energy, which is a pretty healthy energy to work with. By the way, darkness doesn't mean bad. So this being seen on top of his midheaven, whenever I see Lilith contacts happening, I see a need to speak up and to publicly show yourself as, I'm here to defend myself. So we can see the defending energy coming up publicly from this conjunction. Okay, and finally the progressed moon opposes his natal Pluto. Pluto is a ruler of the 4th house of the home environment, so the progressed moon is only this month and next month in opposition to Pluto, so again it does bring a lot of emotional discord that will likely span out through the next, where's his Chiron? 14 degrees. His progressed moon is at 10 degrees for the next 4 months. He's going to feel this discord playing out. With the progressed moon in Pisces, he's also a little bit more emotional than usual. So definitely the next 2 years, he will just finalize the whole financial situation with Amber Heard, and the lawsuits will definitely finalize by that point. All right, so anything else that we see over here? Not much. I think this is pretty much the big story that I wanted to point out. We can definitely go a little bit deeper. Neptune, the ruler of the 8th house, the house of shared finances, is also opposed by Uranus, which is the energy of unconventional events. So he has taken some public action in order to tackle his shared finances and to claim his part back. So that is also seen here. Now, you may be asking, okay, so will he win? Will Amber Heard win? What's gonna happen? And the answer is, I do not know. I was looking at the synastry between him and Amber Heard. So Johnny Depp is in orange and Amber Heard is in blue. A couple of things to note. The very first thing is that Amber Heard's Jupiter is right on top of his Chiron, which basically shows that she's the trigger for his wounds when it comes to shared finances and resources. And then also her Sun and North Node is on top of his midheaven, which means that she's going to play a very big influence on his social status and career. Also, Pluto right on top of his 4th house and right on top of his Lilith placement over here can also show that he has some energies passing over from past relatives and generational wounds that he's addressing. And Pluto conjunct his Lilith, it shows that Amber Heard is going to be a trigger for him to transform those wounds and to heal them. Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, she's helping him out or whatever. I'm not gonna say it like that, but definitely she's a trigger. Her Mars on top of his moon, I think this is a pretty problematic placement in the synastry, just because Mars brings aggression and the moon placement is all about emotions. Some people might say that it's positive just because it brings, you know, sexual passion, but whenever there's passion, there's also desire to fight. So I wouldn't call this a good synastry point, especially because of the natural tendencies in his chart. So these are the major things that I'm noticing. Now, with her Jupiter being in Pisces, there is a Jupiter return that she's currently going through. Now, right after she finishes her Jupiter return, he's gonna go through his Jupiter return. And Jupiter returns to the position of its natal chart every about 12 years. So every time that she goes through Jupiter return, then the very next year or the very next month, he's going through his Jupiter return. It feels like she benefited from a lot of energy, good energy this year. I'm not sure what area was impacted in her natal chart because I don't know her houses. But what I can tell you is that summertime, Jupiter will be on top of Johnny Depp's ninth house and on top of his Jupiter, and that usually brings a lot of good energy coming in, a lot of passion, right? Especially because it rules the fifth house. I would say that, you know, he's gonna have a pretty good time. And also, if we just have a look at the transits really slowly in the following months, Chiron will start to slowly move away. So why do you do it like that? I don't like that. Okay, there we go. So already in May, Chiron is moving away out of orb from Jupiter. The North Node is starting to move towards his midheaven, and Saturn has left his natal Saturn. Of course, they're gonna go retrograde, they're gonna come back, so we're gonna talk about that in a second. But as you can see in June, the transit Jupiter will be already in his ninth house, and it will almost conjunct his natal Jupiter, I believe. It will be within a 5-degree orb, so he's not going to feel that energy 100%. In next year, in 2023, it's going to be exactly conjunct his natal Jupiter, so it's likely that there's still going to be a couple of months in which he's going to be, oh my god, this needs to be sorted, this is not sorted yet, and so on and so forth. But if we keep going on, Saturn has retrograded again below his natal Saturn. Chiron is also returning in October 2022 to his natal Jupiter. This looks like another moment where there could be a trigger. His Lilith on top of his North Node, it feels like the energy is ramping up. So there might be a decision or something important happening for him in October. Okay, and I'm trying to see when things go direct again. In January, he has Saturn touching his natal Saturn again, and Chiron ramping up to his natal Jupiter again. And this looks like the final time that it happens, and then both placements start to move away. So whatever he's going through right now seems to be repeated again in January of 2023. And then in February, March, the energies are moving away. Right after that, in March, his Jupiter is right on top of his transit Jupiter is right on top of his natal Jupiter, so this is where his rewards seem to be coming through. Also, the North Node on the sky, transit North Node reaches his midheaven, South Node reaches his Lilith and IC. It feels like the wounds, the family wounds and the healing work are finally being finalized, and with Lilith entering his first house for the very first time in 9 years approximately, he's calling back his power. So it might be another 12 months until we get a finalization of the whole legal debacle. I don't know whether he's gonna win this lawsuit or if Amber Heard's gonna win this lawsuit, but whatever happens, if we get a verdict early, I think there's gonna be something else that's gonna happen moving on into the next month, so that we can actually see a finalization in April. Now, the final decision might be seen earlier, although there aren't major transits to trigger that. I'm just going to say that there might be an earlier decision, but for them personally, for Johnny Depp personally, from his chart, we can see that he's still gonna work through some wounds, some fears, and until he gets everything resolved. So yeah, I think this is pretty much everything that I wanted to say about his chart, about the transits. I think it's a very interesting thing to have access to public data and to be able to analyze situations like these from a natal perspective and from a transits perspective. If you have similar placements in your natal chart, it does not mean that you're going to go through the same struggles. Again, remember that the whole chart matters, and even though you have a Saturn in the 7th house or Saturn squaring your Venus, it's not going to be necessarily a nasty divorce. So I ask you to be kind to yourselves and also be kind in the comments in general. And if you have any specific questions about your natal chart, or you would like a birth chart reading or transit reading, make sure to check out my shop. The link is in the bio. I wish you guys all the best. Take care of yourselves, and I will catch you later. Bye.